Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and we are back to work on our pre-war rival build, or pre-war competitor build. Can't remember what I decided to call it. Anyway, we have the P-35, and that's Sikorsky, and our kit is Hobbycraft, and we have the P-36 by Curtis, and that one is made by Academy, and here is our P-35, and here is our P-36. As you can see, one is significantly stumpier than the other. And when we last left off, I had installed a window in the side of our P-35. And this was an unusual feature of the P-35. Basically, there was a panel here that could be removed, and you could either fit a solid panel or one with this big picture window in it. And there was a kind of an auxiliary seat where you could carry a passenger back there. So, and it was used on occasion. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the photos you see of P-35s from the time have the window fitted. So anyway, the material I ended up using in there was from an Aquafina water bottle. And of course, none of my cements would touch it. So I ended up using some plumber's cement, which kind of sort of worked on it a bit. And if you recall, I was quite concerned that it was just going to pop out. So you can see on the inside, I've put some strips which straddle the styrene of the kit and the Aquafina bottle there. And of course, because it's on this side, you will hopefully never see it. And hopefully that will do for holding it in place. It's one of these things where the dog just pounded up the stairs, making a ton of noise again. It's one of these things that you wonder why you didn't think about it at the time, because it would have made more sense to have just a very large chunk of plastic here with the window cut out, and it would have been a complete frame as opposed to this. But I didn't think of it at the time, not till after I'd gotten it done. So as you can see, the inside of this one is silver, and the inside of our P-36 is zinc chromate. And the early P-35s were painted aluminum or a natural finish, and then later they switched over to the zinc chromate. So let's get to work on this. We want to finish the interiors basically. So there's the floor of one, and there's the floor of the other. This bent piece of styrene is going to be the start of our rear passenger seat. And I'm just gonna basically copy the pilot seat. Why reinvent the wheel? Logically, you'd think Sikorsky would just use the same seat front and back. I can virtually guarantee they didn't, but I'm just gonna go with that. Better to model a seat that exists than just pull one out of my imagination. So next step for this is going to be to put some sides on it. Or actually, we'll probably end up cutting it to length and height first. Then I'll put some sides in it and carve it down. We've got sides on our seat now. And next step will be to trim them down. Most of the material will be removed. Basically refine the shape, and as well as that round the back here. This is the result after probably 15-20 minutes of shaving and cutting and filing. You can see we've got our second seat there. It's a close clone to the pilot's one. Now the pilot's one actually fits on these rails so it can slide up and down. The passenger seat is going to be probably sitting uncomfortably close to the floor. I'd hate to have to sit back there for any length of time, but you know, you're either going to be almost right on the floor or your head's going to be bent over a double. So anyway, we finally have our seat carved, and I'm going to make some tracks for it to sit on. A little bit of scratch building later, and I've extended the floor of our P-35. And I've mounted our rear seat down. There's only one problem. I am an idiot. And that is, when I went to make the seat, I just went to the hobby bench where I had the parts of both the kits sitting there, and I swore I grabbed the right seat, but I didn't. This seat is copied from the P-36. This is the pilot seat for the P-35. So, yeah, as usual, I'm an idiot. You can always count on me to do something really stupid like scratch build the wrong part. So, actually, I think what happened is if I hold this just right, you can see that there's a bit of a shadow that appears on the floor that looks an awful lot like two little holes. And the part for the P-36 kind of sits on something that looks like a ladder, and it's supposed to fit onto the two holes. And I remember looking at the floor here and saying, oh, there's two little mounting holes. That must be for that ladder-shaped part. And I grabbed what I thought was the part that fit here. No, there is no, if I turn it this way, there is no little holes on the floor. Happens when you're both nearsighted and farsighted at the same time. So I'm going to leave this seat in here. It's visible, but it's not massively visible. So I'm going to be painting this silver, and I'm going to start installing some seat belts. As you can see here, I've got both the engines assembled. They both represent the same engine. This is the Hobbycraft one here, and that's the Academy one. The Hobbycraft one does mold the push rods separately for the front set of cylinders. However, they don't even give you the push rods for the rear set. The Academy one molds them in, so you don't get quite the 3D effect, but they do mold them in on the second row of radials. Now, whether you're going to really see that or not, I don't know. The second row of cylinders there. One thing I will say is that the Hobbycraft cylinders, of course, with a two-row radial, your second row should be out of phase with the first. So everything should line up. So you have cylinder, and then a cylinder, and then a cylinder. With the Academy one, as soon as you line up one of the rear ones so that it's perfectly behind two of the front ones, you go over here to the other side and it's misaligned. So I pretty much had to just kind of fudge it all the way around to get them out of sync. So I think the angles on the Academy engine are not quite right. Anyway, I don't think we're going to notice it once we get it all together. And here's the Hobbycraft engine picked up, not off the floor, but off the workbench. So next step for these is going to be some gunmetal. And then we're going to give the fins a highlight of silver. And here the engine's all painted up. This is a P-35. It is, really, I'm sure it is. This is a P-36. As I mentioned earlier, the push rods on this one are a separate part. That's why they stand out a little bit more. I like the finning on the pistons on the Hobbycraft engine more than the Academy one. The Academy one, they're very, very faint and they're hard to highlight using silver paint. But I like the push rods better on the Academy engine rather than the Hobbycraft. But anyway, here they are painted up. And you'll notice that this one has the axle sticking out and this one just has a hole. Neither one of these planes give you an option to have the propellers spin later on. Not that that's a big deal, but just something you might need to know. I don't know why I find this step annoying, but I do. There's the little strips masking tape in there. Now, sharp-aid people will say, where's the latches? Where's the buckles and stuff like that? Well, I don't usually bother putting those in. If I get some photo etch parts I can use, yeah, I'll put them in. But otherwise, I usually find just having these draped in place is good enough that when you peek in the cockpit, it looks pretty good. So, that's my half-ass strapping, and you try to make them look random, like somebody just kind of left them in there. This, by the way, is our backseat guy. Seatbelts in there too. Before I close up our P-36, here's the front office. Once again, this was done in a pale zinc chromate, and after painting the various details and things, I gave it to me a black panel wash. I think it doesn't look too bad. And here's our P-36 fuselage glued together. I needed clothespins on the tail, but otherwise it went together fairly well. Now you can get the angle right here. You can see there's a see-through here. So before I install the wings, I'm going to be painting the inside of the wing trailing edge here zinc chromate, so that you're not looking down and seeing something that's plain Jane plastic. There is a little bit of a step right here. That shouldn't be too hard to deal with. But I'm fairly happy with how the cockpit turned out. I don't think there is a part for a headrest. I might look online and see if there was a headrest there. But at any rate, we've got our P-36 fuselage together. Here's our P-35 fuselage halves. And you can see they've been painted up with some highlights put in there, and a panel wash from Tamiya as well. I know on this part here you can see the white styrene strips that hold the window in place. We won't be able to see those when it's glued together. So this will be the next step, is gluing these fuselage halves together, and hopefully everything stays in place and it goes together all right. Okay, we're gluing together the P-35 fuselage now. I've got the tail glued together, and that cement is basically set. Now I'm just waiting for me to grab the fuselage and squeeze and blow in this window. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know it's very likely I'm going to do that. So from here back, it goes together very, very well. However, as I mentioned last episode, we got a lot of springy going on here. And it does come together. It does come together without crushing anything inside. So it's just a matter of get the back together, let it dry, and then glue the front together. And I guess use the old thumb and finger clamp to hold it together. You could put some tape on there if you wanted. As you can see, it doesn't really put up much of a fight, and it's just kind of springy. And if I get the light on there just right, you should be able to see that seat in the back. So let's get this glued together. And the P-35 fuselage halves are together. You can see how they went together underneath, and this is my crude edition of a rear floor. As I mentioned in the previous clip, all it took was just a little bit of pressure to hold it together. I made sure that I used some Plastrex cement, and I just basically, sat off to the side and watched something on YouTube for about 10 minutes while I held it. So we can see, depending on the light, we can see the seat installed back there and the side ribbing, so I think it was worth the effort. And we are ready to start working on the wings. We've got a pair of wings, or a set of wings. Here's our P-36, the P-35. Maybe we'll turn it around so we can make a fair comparison here. There we go. You can see the P-36 has a bit longer wingspan, and tends to be a little bit more straighter. The P-35 is a little more graceful. You can see where the landing gear retracts on the P-35. P-36, of course, they turn 90 degrees and lay in the wing roots. Now, or not in the wing roots, in the wing itself. Now, this is interesting. If you look at our wheel wells, you can see Academy has molded in what looks to be a fabric cover covering up the structure. That's a nice touch. That's a nice detail. I don't know what color those covers were what color the fabric was, but I'm definitely going to make it something other than silver, just to show that off. And the trailing edge of both kits comes together really nicely. Not really any problems there. Now, this is always a critical part of putting together an aircraft kit, is how well do the wings go onto the fuselage? I mean, sometimes they just plug into the side, and sometimes, as with both of these, you end up with the fuselage coming down and mating with the assembled wings. Looks like I'm going to have to be careful right here. This is quite a complex join, but I don't think it's going to be a big problem. Looks like everything lines up pretty good. It's just mostly going to be filling some gaps. As you can see, we've got a step here, which is going to have to be taken care of on the fuselage. On the top side, there's just a little bit of a gap here. I'll probably fill that with white glue. Oh, and we've got a bit of a gap back here I had to take care of. I think some glue will take care of that. Before attaching our wings to our fuselages, you can see that I've added some silver paint to our P-35 and some green paint to our P-36. This isn't zinc chromate, but I didn't have that bottle of paint handy, and you're barely going to be able to see it at all anyway, so it's just one of these things, if you don't put that paint in there, you will be able to see it. This seems to be the worst part fit-wise on the P-36. You can see there's if I move my thumb, you can see we've got a definite misalignment there. All this area here isn't brilliant, but it's not terrible. I think if I do some mild sanding, it should be okay. This side's looking a whole lot better. Like I said, it's just this edge right here. So I'm going to be rubbing that down with a little roll of sandpaper, see if we can tidy that up. Okay, that didn't take long at all to rub down with a little bit of sandpaper. And when I said a rolled up bit of sandpaper, this is what I mean. You just kind of bunch some together and it gives you a nice curve that you can kind of flex and adjust. And you can see I also sanded down here too. My next step with this plane is I'm going to take a little bit of white glue or carpenter's glue, and I'm just going to smear it over these cracks, wipe off the excess, and that's an easy way to fill in a gap without using a filler that you would have to sand off. So that is what our white glue filler looks like, and you can just quickly apply it, wipe it down, and leave it in the crack to dry out. Let's see how our P-35 is going to come together. So here's our top view, and we've got a little bit more of a gap than we had with the P-36. Probably I'm going to want to put a very thin slice of styrene on, at least on one side, if not both. But in terms of the top and bottom, I think it's actually a better fit than the P-36. So doesn't look like there's going to be any huge problems with the wings on either one of them. Now, before I glue my P-35 fuselage on, you hopefully will be able to see that I've added a piece of styrene packing on either side of our wing root here. And that's just to take up some of the space, eliminate some of that gap that we saw. Now, otherwise, it seems to be a good fit, so we'll see what it looks like when I get it all glued together. I don't think I'm going to have to do any serious clamping or anything. But, yeah. The glue has been applied, and we seem to have a pretty good fit all the way around, especially on the trailing edge. This is usually a bad spot on any model. Right here, I think, is going to be our biggest trouble spot with this particular model. You can see we've got the engine cowling actually stands a little bit proud of the wing root. So I think that's where we're going to be doing a little bit of sanding and a little bit of filling. But overall, not too bad. So it's looking like I need a fresh tube of Tamiya putty. This stuff is starting to get a little bit crusty. But you can see I didn't put a whole lot on here. And I've just got a little bit of mild sanding to do here and here. And if we look at the wing roots, you can see there's the piece of styrene that I used to take up some of the space on either side. So we'll see how sanding fixes up things. Well, this looks awkward, but you can see we've got our engines mounted. I know there's an awful lot of space between the engine and the firewall, but that's the way it's supposed to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be painting the firewall of my P-35. That's going to be silver. The P-36 is going to be zinc chromate. And as well, I'm going to be painting the insides of the cowling the same colors. Well, they still look goofy, but at least the firewalls match the rest of the internals. I think it's about time that I can put the cowlings on. There's the P-35 cowling on. As you can see, I've also put the tail feathers on. They went on without any drama at all. But at least it's... we actually focus here. At least it's not looking quite so stumpy as it did. Still a very short aircraft, but there's a little bit of sleekness now to it. Now, before I glue the cowling on our P-36, I did notice that the cowling didn't want to fit on there exactly centered. It was kind of interfering with the tops of these cylinders, so I just gave them a little bit of a file just to knock them down. It's nothing we're ever going to see, but it'll help our cowling to go on nice and straight and flush. And now the P-36 gets its cowling. Now, it always was a little bit more sleeker looking aircraft, although it definitely is a deeper fuselage. I don't know so much it's deeper as it's not as wide, especially in the cockpit. You could say they were maybe a little ahead of their time, a little bit of Coke bottle going on here. Not that anybody knew that was the key to going faster. Anywho, as you can see, the tail feathers have also been put on this. And we're over the 20-minute mark by probably a minute or so, so I think it's about time to wrap this up. So this build is going along with not any real drama, so you know I'm doomed for the next episode. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.